thank goodness there is naturopathic medicine, because really you can see there's a great gap in the spectrum of what we feel our human right is to healthcare, to fully understanding ourselves, the way our bodies work.
Welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. And we are here with Dr. Monique Mazza, who is a naturopathic doctor. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I have lots of opinions on the limitations of conventional medicine. So it gives me so much pleasure to have Dr. Monique Mazza here, who is a naturopathic doctor and will tell us what naturopathic medicine is, the many benefits of it, and how you can include it in your healing and your care. So, Dr. Monique, welcome.
Thank you, Natalie, for this opportunity to empower folks, and welcome to my garden. We're here at my home in North Carolina in Black Mountain at Earth Haven Eco Village. So I'm happy to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, amazing. Just seeing the background is already relaxing my body. I'm hearing like the sirens and all of New York, but just seeing that is just bringing calm to my body. It's really beautiful.
Right. There's studies that say that looking at the color green increases calming hormones, the theta waves in the brain. So you can paint the wall green in New York if you have to.
Yes.
Or put more plants in your house.
Yes. All right. So let me read your bio so our listeners know a bit more about who you are before we dive in. So Dr. Mazza is a licensed naturopathic physician with over 15 years of clinical experience. She began her medical career as an emergency medical technician for volunteer fire departments in New York. In addition to her education as a naturopathic primary care physician, Dr. Mazza has additional certifications in intravenous nutrient therapy, German biological science, and biodynamic farming. Her current passion surrounds growing food as medicine at her home in Earth Haven Eco Village. All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with, what is naturopathic medicine?
Great. Well, naturopathic medicine is a system of primary care medicine. Basically, we are trained very similarly to allopathic physicians. We have a 4-year undergraduate period of study and then a 4-year period of naturopathic medicine intense study. There are 4 medical schools in the US that currently train and accredit. They're accredited schools, so they train doctors in naturopathic medicine. And what it is really a few things. The philosophical difference is what separates it from allopathic medicine. So we're trained similarly, and actually we spend twice the amount of hours in anatomy and physiology. So naturopathic doctors really understand how the body is working innately on its own. We have an incredible, amazing system of biology and physiology that is meant to repair itself and detect when there's a foreign invader and take care of itself. And so naturopathic education spends a lot of time to understand how that works. So whereas in the allopathic model, there's half of the emphasis is on that, and half of the emphasis is on using pharmaceutical interventions to cover up some of the symptoms. And so that's the antithesis of what naturopathic medicine does. Naturopathic medicine wants to get to the underlying root cause of the symptoms, find out what's really causing things. So an analogy of this would be if your car check engine light goes on, and the allopathic model would be to find a way to shut that light off. So no more problem, right? However, the naturopathic model, we know that light went on for a reason, and we're going to seek to find the underlying cause of why that went on and basically correct that. Put some gas in the tank, put some oil in the gears, So we also, in addition to underlying that root cause and finding that, treating the whole person as a whole connected system. We do not compartmentalize folks, And we're often looking at how the systems are connected, a major connection between the gut, the immune system, and our brain. For instance, that's a lot of where I focus my practice, because often folks that have things going on in the digestive area will have immune system imbalances, and often have neurological type and mental emotional type concerns as well. So treating the person as a whole system. And then emphasis is also on prevention, trying to prevent illness, because it's much easier to prevent things as opposed to actually treating them once they've gotten, especially if it's a long established chronic illness. So emphasis on prevention and individualized treatment. Really, there are no cookie cutter type protocols. So we really don't treat this. So if a person comes to me with eczema on their skin, there may be 7 different ways to treat that. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about how I individualize my treatment in a visit with folks. But naturopathic medicine is kind of like being a medical detective. And we're trying to find out all the nuances about what goes on in this person's life. And that person lives inside of the environment and has interactions with that. And so it's not only, we're looking at many factors that result in the person's health and contribute to the health, including their diet, their interpersonal relationships, their genetics. And the genetics are only about 30% of how we express actually what our health is. So just because we may have a genetic tendency, there's 70% chance of whether that gene gets turned on or off. And that's really where naturopathic doctors work. And those genes are controlled by things in our environment. So it's empowering to know that we're not doomed with some type of, lingering disease coming down the line. We can modify it. And the brain is neuroplastic, so we can change things even if there was damage. So naturopathic medicine is about repair, empowerment, prevention, and connection.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that example with the eczema, I'm sure as people are listening, if someone has had eczema, the treatment could have been like using, some topical cream for it.
Usually.
So you're continuing to treat the physical manifestation or the symptoms, but you haven't found what led to that, right? Which means that you could. That's a perfect example. The eczema in this case would be the check engine light. And the way we shut off the check engine light is by applying a corticosteroid cream on top. Boy, that stuff works fast. It shuts down the immune system. It's not able to inflame and show you there's a problem. So your skin looks better. But it's only a temporary fix. Usually that skin flare was a symptom of the body trying to tell us something, whether it was an inflammatory allergen or some other type of stress. So we shut that off, and then usually the disease goes deeper in the body. So typically for children, it'll start as eczema, and then if it's treated the way we just said, then the disease goes deeper and typically starts out to cause something happening in the lungs. Like maybe an asthmatic type situation. The lungs are our second skin. And so the disease starts to go deeper in the body. Wow.
So I can say a little bit more, if you like, about how naturopathic medicine is similar to allopathic medicine, because we often we're criticized for not being scientific, and it's really it's not a true argument at all. It's really not backed up in science. There's our profession has so much research behind it. And if you look for the studies on herbal things and supplemental nutraceuticals, there's loads and loads and loads of information, especially at the National Institutes of Health. And so the naturopathic schools are accredited by standardized accrediting bodies, so that the school's education are all standardized. Beyond that, we have clinical, 3 of our 4 years are actually done in clinical setting with direct patient care. We take board exams at the end of our at the end of 2 years and at the end of the 4 year of our training programs, so that we're basically in par with allopathic physicians.
Yeah.
And then we have licensing exams in each state. There's about 24 licensed naturopathic states that license naturopathic doctors in the U.S., and I'll talk more about that a little bit in the end. And then we have continuing education requirements. So in order to keep our licenses current. So it's really in par with what allopathic medical doctors have as their standard. And then, of course, there's the differences. So lots of research behind what's happening in naturopathic medicine as well. So just wanted to point that out, because it's often kind of where the finger is pointed at. It's like, there's no science behind naturopathic medicine. That is not true.
Yeah. So I had a guest come on a few episodes ago, and she started talking about midwifery care,
Yes.
right? And how that used to be, the wisdom of our grandmothers. And I feel like naturopathic medicine is very similar, how we used to hold these wisdom within our families, within our communities. And there was some shift that occurred, so that all of that began to happen inside of the hospital settings. So share more about that, like how it came to be that there is this separation.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, all of what the medical schools used to be teaching prior to 1910, it was all naturopathic based medicine, because it was the medicine of the ancestors. It was the wisdom of the plants and the natural world. That's all folks had. And it was powerful. It birthed babies. It kept people from, having disease, of course, with the onset of better hygiene and better sanitation systems. Folks got better. They lived longer, life expectancy expanded. Around 1910, there was this report that was given in the Senate, that in the US Congress, that was called the Flexner Report. And Flexner was not a doctor. He was kind of a businessman, and he was hired by Andrew Carnegie and Rockefeller. So those were the major oil, petroleum-based businesses in the US at the time. They had this gentleman write this report and look at how Germany was used as a model for scientific medicine. And unfortunately, they used this, the excuse behind the report was to make medical schools more scientific. So they used this sort of German model. Well, it was also very much a strategy to get more pharmaceutical-based teachings into the medical schools, because the oil companies were starting to make the pharmaceuticals, and they wanted to sell those types of medicines to the people. So when you have two businessmen behind making a report that talks about our health and well-being, you have to stop and question, what was the motive behind that, really? So it unfortunately did shut down many naturopathic medical schools. A few survived. The one school that I went to, in National College of Naturopathic Medicine, actually survived some form through that. And so it's, it really was sort of a political and a business-driven shift that medicine unfortunately took the wrong turn. Now we're trying to re-empower ourselves, take the knowledge back, and give it back to the people. That's our one basic human right. Also, the report was somewhat racist, definitely biased towards African-American doctors. There were suggestions about them needing to learn hygiene versus medicine. There were some ridiculous things in this report. And so it's very questionable, the validity of this report. If you take the time to read it, you'll see. So that's what happened there, really.
And we know that plants and herbs, like, you can't claim ownership over that, but you do have ownership over, a medicine, some pill or some formula that you create from said plants and herbs.
Yes, when you can patent something, there's a lot more profit in that. So a company is going to often give the press to the patented situation or whatever substance they've made, versus the echinacea or the chrysanthemums that you can grow in your backyard, right? So unfortunately, it's been driven by money. And that doesn't have the healing interest of our, the human race in mind. It's
Mm-hmm.
for the benefit of a few folks.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I love what you said about taking the power back, right? Having us taking our power back.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So I want us to go into the difference between what happens in your consultations or in when you meet your patients versus what typically happens in allopathic medicine, which is
Sure.
conventional medicine that we know today. And I
Yes.
do want to share one of my recent experiences with a family member in a GI's office.
Uh-huh.
And you can
Uh-huh.
include it, you can it's going to set context for what we're talking about.
Sure.
So we were in this GI's office. This family member has been having stomach issues for a while, or digestive issues for a while. And so I went in with questions because I wanted to dig deeper. I'm just a curious person. But
Good.
secondly, when you see someone in pain, you actually want a solution and not the band-aid on top, right? You
That's
don't
right.
want the topical cream. You want to know what's happening under the surface. And so I was asking questions like, oh, this new medication, how will it help? When you say it impacts the top of the digestion, what does that mean? What is the impact? Right?
Right.
And I was asking, well, firstly, we were being prescribed medication that we had some 3 months ago that wasn't helping, but
Mm,
at a higher dosage. And so
mm.
obviously something needed to change. And the doctor was polite in the beginning and responding to my questions, and eventually you could tell that he got annoyed, like he didn't
Oh,
want to help me to understand and help my family member to understand what was happening in their system, right? And how the drug can help. And
right.
another question I asked was, is it possible that something somewhere else in the body could be leading to imbalance in the gut? And he said,
Mhm.
yes, I wouldn't deny that that's
Mm.
possible. So I
Mhm.
asked, can we look into tests? Are there tests that we can look at that would help us to identify what those things are? And he said that they already did a blood test, but nothing showed up.
Mm.
And I don't remember what my other question was, but his response was, I'm not going to argue with you about it. And I'm like, this isn't an argument.
Oh,
I
oh,
am
I'm
trying to
sorry.
educate myself because
Right.
I am seeing this person in pain. And you are
Mm-hmm.
going to go home not having to deal with this issue, right? And
Right.
eventually we were told that, or the appointment had come to the end and he had to see another patient, and we were directed to the door. Like, this guy literally
Right.
said the exit is that way. And it's just the
Oh,
resistance that comes up when doctors are questioned. And that touched me in a really tender place, because a part of my work is helping my clients to advocate for themselves,
right.
right? And
That's
so
right.
if I am providing them with questions that they can ask their doctor so that they know what's going on too, and
Yes.
they're met with that resistance, it's like, where are we going then?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Well, you go to
yeah.
a naturopathic doctor.
Exactly. So tell me what happens in your sessions.
Perfect segue. So, yes, thank goodness there is naturopathic medicine, because really you can see there's a great gap in the spectrum of what we feel our human right is to
Hmm.
healthcare, to fully understanding ourselves, the way our bodies work. So,
Right.
um, I believe in the term complementary medicine, not
Hmm.
alternative, because that means either or, and that starts
Mm.
the sort of energy of a competition. And
Yeah.
your doctor was sort of feeling, I think, maybe some threat and some
Hmm.
anxiety about having to ask questions that
Yeah.
he wasn't really educated in, and
Yeah.
feeling that he had to defend his position, whereas you were
Mm.
just trying to empower yourself with more knowledge, and you both are coming from a spot of caring for the
Mm.
family member.
Mhm.
But there was unfortunately this rising of now competition. I see where she's
Mhm.
going with this. And
Mm.
so naturopathic medicine, I always try to be a collaborative type of force with my patients to
Mm.
connect them back to their allopathic doctors, because we
Mm.
need them on board for
Yeah.
various reasons.
Yeah.
So in a typical visit with a naturopathic doctor, the first thing is a really comprehensive medical history form that's filled out prior to coming into the visit. So I get a good sense of the patient before I see them. This is about lots of different things, including their exposures to toxins, also how their mom's health was in pregnancy. We know a lot of things which would be interesting for this amount of your viewers are that what happens in pregnancy can actually affect the fetus in their later life. And so we often are asking really in-depth questions about family history, and also then how much is the patient willing to change themselves? How much are they willing to take action to participate in their healing? So it sets a very different mindset. You know, the mindset is, you're the patient and you're going to be educated and you're part of your healing. I'm not going to give you a pill that just shuts down everything and you keep going on doing the things that are out of balance. So the history intake form starts to take into consideration, you know, how much do you drink? Do you exercise? Do you read? Do you watch TV? How many hours? So it's really collecting all the bits and pieces that are going to be talked about in depth. So a typical visit is 2 hours. Maybe even 2.5 hours. And so a typical allopathic visit is maybe 7 to 10 minutes. So you're really feeling heard at the end of your visit. And the first hour and a half is an in-depth interview with addressing some of those areas that I mentioned to you, especially exposures to toxins, dietary things. How well do you sleep? Do you like your job? What's your relationship like? All of these things. And whether you were born vaginally or cesarean, all of this matters to our health. The other part, then we go into looking at a physical exam. Naturopathic doctors are trained in how to examine the body head to toe, just like a regular medical doctor is. And we often take more time there because there's a lot of clues in the physical exam. What do the nails look like? What does the tongue look like? Are there dark circles under the eyes? Is the skin hydrated? How are the reflexes? Is this thyroid boggy? What's the integrity of the skin looking like? Or how white are the eyes? Are they yellow or red? The hair, how healthy is the hair? All things that the physical body is showing us all the time. We just have to look from the right lenses, right? Using medical detective lenses. So physical exam, and then usually some type of recommendation for lab testing. I really like to do lab testing. That's very much my scientist, geek, philosophy, physiology, passion that I have. There are so many good laboratories that test way beyond what the typical standardized blood tests from a hospital ER trip or even some medical doctors do. We go way deeper into the body to look at hormone levels, toxin levels, inflammatory markers. Inflammation is a huge underlying cause for illness. And there's lots of markers that are, unfortunately, they're common tests, but they're just not ordered by the medical doctors. I don't know why. And they're very good to detect how thick is the blood. Is this person not feeling well because their blood is not moving? Well, that's D-dimer. That's an easy one to show us how thick the blood is. C-reactive protein. Is the body inflamed? And interleukin-6, are there cytokines which are like inflammatory products that are just high in the body? That means that the body is going to feel a burden and feel unwell. So we can prove and evaluate how a person's feeling just by lab markers. So beyond that, there's saliva tests and stool tests that show us what's going on inside the gut, what's type of microbiome. That's a huge area of study right now. What kind of bacteria we're holding, the good and the bad, because we may not have enough of the good guys. We may have so much of the bad guys that we're not getting the benefits from our microbiome. We are 9 times more bacterial DNA than we are human DNA. So we got to get the bacteria right. If that population is off, we will be off.
Yeah.
So picking the right lab test for the person. And then when we have lab tests back, usually I send the person home with some wellness recommendations. And that basically goes through dietary changes, lifestyle suggestions, and then any supplements that I may have chosen are also part of that. So how do I choose supplements? When I've done a good diagnosis through history, being a good listener, and then maybe doing a physical exam, and then lastly looking at interpreting their labs, we'll usually decide, okay, this person needs some type of immune modulating substance. And I say modulating because a lot of the press is like immune boosting, and we don't always want to immune boost. We want to immune modulate. So if somebody's immune system is too upregulated, we need to calm it down and tone it down. If somebody's system is low and weak, we need to boost it up. So it's hard to just say immune boosting. So modulating, and that's where I rely on kinesiology. So kinesiology is an energetic system that is based on the principle that you and I have energy all around us, and these plants are giving off an energy field, and even a substance, even a little capsule in a bottle is giving off an energy field. And so we know this energy field, we feel these when sometimes we feel good around a certain person or in a certain setting. We walk into a room and, oh, this feels good in here. Or other times we cross paths with a typical individual and that feels a little dark to me, the person. So we're already palpating this subtle energy around us. And so Dr. Okihara was the person who invented and then further validated O-ring testing. So we use the person basically holding themselves in an O with their fingers, and in the other side, they hold the substance that we're testing. And then based on their strength, I try to pull their fingers apart and they try to resist me, and I can feel the difference. And so before we ever put a substance in their hand, we have them give themselves energy and test their energy and give away their energy. And in most cases, people are weaker when they give their energy away. Just by turning the palm out, their force is different. So we use kinesiology to distinguish between the two types of echinacea. There's tens of thousands of natural products out there. And some of them all have similar ingredients or a little bit different. And so kinesiology is the way that I really individualize my treatments for folks. So once that's then discovered what supplements they had a strengthening with through kinesiology, I'll recommend those things. And I don't like to overwhelm people. Some people have the image of naturopathic medicine, meaning a bag full of supplements, and that is definitely not the way to go. I'm very sensitive to that. Some of my patients come in, they're like, I've been really good. I have this bag full of things. And I'm like, you know what, that's not sustainable. You're not going to be able to take all those things for a very long period of time. It's too stressful to have to take all these things. So I work with folks to meet their needs and their preferences and their and consideration of their budget. So we try to create a protocol that's going to be effective but easy. Easy. I think naturopathic medicine has some myths about it also, about it being very difficult and very expensive, and it does not have to be that way at all. So we typically start with a focused protocol that's going to be effective, and then usually the beauty of naturopathic medicine, when the body is getting the right nutrition and the right supplement if it's needed and the right environmental conditions, healing can happen very fast. And so within 3 weeks, I like to see patients back in my office for a follow-up consultation. Because then I'll know if things are improving, great. If they're not improving, it's because there's something underlying or there's some other factor that I haven't discovered yet that we need to talk about and address.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. And I would say that I can imagine that, someone who's in your office feels really heard and really understood and really taken care of. But I've actually experienced that because
Ah,
we had a session with you, and
yes.
in that session, we learned so much about the body. Right
Yes.
there, it didn't feel like you were trying to withhold information, like you wanted us to learn.
Right. Yes, of course. We work together. And the patient and their family members are a big healing component. I put a lot more faith and expectations on the person and the family members to heal
Yeah.
than the supplements that I prescribe, right?
Yeah.
So, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about empowering with knowledge to simplify so that a layperson can understand their illness. So often taking time to explain, this is what I'm testing for. This is sort of the physiology in simple terms. And when they understand also the medicine and how it's supposed to work, you heal better, because now when you
Yeah.
take that medicine, you have no doubts about it. There is something called the placebo effect, which great, 30% of the success in some clinical trials is due to the placebo effect. Well, I'll
Yeah.
take that 30% in my favor. And if I can tell the patient and set a healing intention, why not? Why
Yeah.
not empower the person with knowledge? This is what this is going to do, set the intention, and then we actually manifest that.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that.
So, one other thing I want to mention is that sometimes I need to refer to, lots of us have mental, emotional happening, influences. And I always try to try to at least talk about that.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a whole deep dive that requires its own type of visit. Traumatic experiences have a major impact on our health.
Yeah.
And abuse, and unfortunately far too many of us have that in our history. And so I try to at least ask about it and get a little bit of a feeling of how it affects that person individually.
Yeah.
I never just take a straight answer, a straight response of, I feel depressed. Well, I'll ask deeper. So pretend I don't know what depression is and tell me how you feel, without using that word, and tell me what needs you have that aren't being met. What are your needs and what are your feelings behind those needs when they're not being met?
Yeah.
And then sometimes referring to marriage and family therapists or cognitive behavioralists for some type of, I really love experiencing not so much the cognitive behavioral therapy, the talk therapy. That
Yeah.
can take a really long time. So I like to refer folks to more of the EMDR, which is called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. That's a mouthful right there, but EMDR is a great way to, it's bringing up, it's guided through us in a safe container with a licensed marriage and family therapist. And it's basically revisiting a traumatic experience, but using eye movement left and right to activate the left and right hemispheres of the brain to actually cross the center of the brain. The amygdala is our center of fear, and we remember our fears and our traumas really good because we want to survive and never have that happen to us again.
Right.
If we bring back the memory and have this alternating eye movement, we're creating like a circuit where we have closure to that event. So it's not so much a hypnosis where we forget about the event, but we can reprocess it and now put it in a safe place for ourselves. So
Yeah.
the example is like being on a train, and there's train stops all along, train stations, and it's a matter of fact thing. Yes, I was just at the station in Belmont, and now I'm going to the station in whatever. Yes, I had that experience when I was 12 years old, but now I'm here. And
Yeah.
so it takes down the amount of provocation of anxiety and sadness and grief or whatever it is. It decreases that level of provoking this response that can create chaos in the immune system.
Yeah.
So EMDR and also somatic experiencing, those are two things that I often refer out to.
Mm-hmm.
for folks to get that work while they're getting the naturopathic healing at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
that is very much in line with what I talk about, that, trauma lives in the body. And so there has to be some
Oh, yeah.
experiencing in the body that is releasing that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There's a great book called The Healing Codes, that was written by two naturopathic doctors. And that's something y'all can look into, the
Mm-hmm.
listeners. It's been really helpful also for myself before I got ready for my own pregnancy. And I guess
Yeah.
I could tell you a little bit about my experience with my healing road too, if you're interested.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
yeah. So, being a doctor is sort of getting the challenge yourself of an illness, a physician heal thyself, or just to be, to connect with folks about my own journey in healing.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised by parents from St. Martin, and so I'm really proud of that heritage I have. Had any listeners in St. Martin? So they raised me with a lot of land-based, food-based medicine and herbs and things like that. And so I then later on became interested in anatomy and what was inside of things, and thought I would just go to pre-med school because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much graduated high school, went right into study my Bachelor of Science in biology and pre-med. And then on the fourth year of that school, I took my medical college admission test. I didn't score very high. So my pre-med advisor told me that I might want to go to a osteopathic medical school because they were easier to get into. And I had no idea what osteopathic medicine was. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, I better take a year off and just pause
Mm-hmm.
and see what this osteopathic medicine is all about. It made sense to me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you manipulate all the bones in the body and you try to make sure the nerves that are feeding off of these bones properly innervate and make our organs function properly. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So I said, I'm just going to pause and check out this osteopathic medicine thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked at a garden center doing some horticultural things, selling annual plants. And I got really into, I had a good friendship with this horticulturalist who sort of got me into the science behind the plants a little more. And I wanted to know how to make lavender medicine, lavender essential oil. So I went online and basically looked up how to make lavender essential oil, and I found
Yeah.
education, and I found the definition of naturopathic medicine, and
Mm.
it turned the light on for me. It was an automatic aha, that's the type of medicine I want to do. We can
Wow.
blend the science of nature and the wisdom of our ancestors all together in a validated by science and accredited program. Sign me up. So I applied to all four schools. I got accepted to all four schools. And then I had a choice and I landed in Portland, Oregon.
Mm.
Pretty much now here I am at 21 in medical school, ready to go. And then I graduated within 4 years from medical school and took a year off to travel. And then by 25, I was starting to practice in 2004.
Nice. Wow.
And I just, one thing after the next. And I had a very successful practice. I was able to meet people and do some things with markets, local food markets. And I would offer people some free advice and guidance as they were shopping through the nutraceutical department. And so my practice grew. I also I was in California in San Diego, and I joined the California Naturopathic Doctors Association, their legislative committee, to further our licensure. We had been recently licensed in the state and unfortunately not licensed to the full extent of our knowledge and training. So we had some lobbying to do to get the medical professionals and the laboratory boards to understand that we really did have this education and we can actually interpret a pregnancy test and a urine analysis. And these were simple things, right?
Yeah.
So I worked with the legislative committee and became the vice president of the CNDA for a while, for 7 years. So I was busy. I was doing a lot of things and feeling great doing it. But then around 2010, I started to get a little imbalanced. I started to mentally, I was feeling a little bit drained and sort of like, I'm bored with what I'm doing here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting at this desk and I'm here for sometimes 9, 10 hours a day. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
having great interactions with people, but I'm sitting for 9, 10 hours a day. And I was
Yeah.
there for 5 days a week.
Wow.
And I was also feeling a calling to have some more connection with the earth. And so
Mm.
I started getting dizzy, vertigo. I started getting twitches in certain spots of mostly in my eyes. And I went to my medical doctor with this dizziness. And he diagnosed me through blood tests with
Mm-hmm.
Lyme disease.
Mm.
And so I did grow up in New York. I had a boyfriend who was a hunter, and we grew up on Long Island with lots of
Mm-hmm.
deer around. And
Mm.
so I figured somehow I had gotten a tick bite and I didn't know it. And so I
Yeah.
had dealt with this illness all throughout college where I would get flare-ups of real severe aches and pains, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what it was. So when I started, okay, I have Lyme disease. Wow.
Yeah.
Started studying about Lyme disease, and boy, is it scary. All the ways that it's described is
Mm-hmm.
a stealth pathogen, one that, changes its shape just as you start to treat it. It changes and then it needs a different treatment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
chronic. It doesn't go away. It can leave people paralyzed. And I'm like, okay,
Wow.
not me. Not me, not now. No, I
Mm-hmm.
believe much more in the reason behind what is going on. If I've had Lyme disease all throughout my undergraduate years and I
Mm.
was able to manage it, what's happening
Yeah.
now that I can't manage it any longer?
Right.
And what else do I need? So I went on a healing journey,
Mm-hmm.
and I dove into creating space for my healing was my first strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
started taking 2 days off per week,
Mm-hmm.
and I started to increase my yoga and meditation practice. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful for the yoga community and for some of my teachers who, Maral Salerno and Chance Billmeyer, who I hope you're well. And if you're listening to this video, thank you so much for the healing that you've offered me. And so taking time to slow down,
Mm.
connect with myself, connect with a higher power. And
Yeah.
then I started organic gardening. I volunteered for this great little organic farm called Wild Willow Farm in San Diego on
Mm-hmm.
Fridays. And so I got my hands in the dirt and got to growing things
Mm-hmm.
and really started creating some balance. I also did a 10-week whole body cleanse with
Wow.
also including heavy metals and parasites. There were all kinds of things happening in my body. And
Mm-hmm.
so we addressed it over the course of the 10 weeks. And then I sold my medical practice because it wasn't serving me anymore. I wanted to be in this type of a setting,
Yeah.
showing people how to be healthy instead of telling them how to be healthy. So I'll
Wow.
talk a little bit more about my next project here, the seeds for what I'm trying to manifest here. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Lyme disease was a gift.
Mm.
It was a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what made me go deeper into, I was eating well, I was taking some supplements, for sure I was stellar on that, but I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going a little the deeper. The spiritual connection, the space for play was not
Mm-hmm.
present in my daily life, and the connection to the earth wasn't present. So
Yeah.
once I brought those elements in, everything changed. And I'm
Mm.
happy to say that I no longer deal with Lyme disease or any of its repercussions or symptoms or anything. I
Mm-hmm.
pretty much have been Lyme disease free
Wow.
it's been, I guess it's been 10 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm. Yeah, you just said all the things. I have to just let that
Yeah. Let
sit.
that sink in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Mm. Okay, so you've done a bit of traveling. So you sold your practice. Is it after
Yeah.
selling your practice that you started doing some traveling?
Yeah, I did. Um, I had been blessed to be in part of a medical outreach team in medical school, in my third year of medical school, 2001, I went to Peru and did some medical outreach for a Catholic mission that allowed me to see all kinds of things. Unfortunately, the effects of poverty and the extent of human gratitude. It was so broad spectrum of what the emotions we were feeling, because we had street boys that were, you know, the boys are typically pushed out of their homes if a new husband can't take care of them. They're not the father of the child. They're often asked to leave, and they wind up on the streets smelling things like glue and other inhalants to just get them through and to squelch their hunger, quite frankly. So this mission was taking the boys, giving them a home, feeding them, educating them. And we were privileged to be able to see these folks and some of their other extended family. And we'd see all kinds of heartbreaking things, disorders that, you know, could have been taken care of, but just because they don't have access. So it really helped me to understand my own passion for serving the underserved populations, which is what I want to do here for my next venture. And so I got a taste for travel and for South America, and I loved it. And so when my husband and I closed up our our situation in San Diego, we moved to Argentina, which is where he's from. And he was spending some time there with his family, and I was taking a break, and we got pregnant. And so we intentionally wanted to create that space to have our child. We waited intentionally to create the space in our daily life where we weren't hustling and bustling, and we weren't going to have to send her to daycare right away. We intentionally created this pause to invite this spirit, to invite this life to our family. And the moment she was conceived, there was a shooting star and all of that funny stuff that seems like a movie, but it's so true. I could tell you that story another day. It was really, really amazing. And so she was born at home in Brazil with a few doulas and basically on our own. So we could do a whole nother talk about, you know, empowering women to birth at home in a safe way, in a supported way. So have the amazing experience of the physiology of the body, the amazing physiology of the body through a birth. I was perfectly, had no medications or no painkillers at all through the whole experience. And it only lasted 6 hours. She came pretty fast. So that was, I'm grateful for that. And then, spent the time being a mother and nursing her for 2 years. And we found Earth Haven because we were looking for, I knew before I left San Diego, towards the end of my practice, there was a theme with my patients. Lots of folks had the theme, the common connecting factor was that they were disconnected from a community of some kind. Lots of these folks that were ill and they weren't getting better. Were the ones that didn't have connection to a friend or family or some other kind of social network or hobby. Those are the folks that had a harder time healing. And so I started to see, I want to walk people through being healthy. And so I realized that community is a big piece of health and healing. And there's studies now that show that loneliness is actually worse for us than smoking and sometimes drinking alcohol. So just being lonely can kill you, literally.
Oh my gosh.
And so community was, and my husband agreed. He thought right away, yep, you know, he is more of a communitarian than I am these days. And so we found this through a great book by Diana Leaf Christian called Creating a Life Together. And she profiled several communities in the US, and Earth Haven was one of them. And Earth Haven just celebrated its 27th year anniversary. 27 years. It's a 320-acre community, and there's about 10 neighborhoods that are mostly divided into neighborhood co-ops. So that's how they're governed and legally structured. And we work together on a smaller scale. This is Bella Via neighborhood. And we came here to create an experiential health retreat where we mix in gardening and we mix in food as medicine and we mix in connecting to one another.
Wow.
Yeah. So The healing that's woven through getting ourselves grounding in the earth, cleansing, getting some negative ions, which we know are healing and calming.
Yeah.
Growing good food, cooking that good food together, and then sharing things over a meal with folks that help us to process grief, share our joys, celebrate one another, create rituals around our rites of passage.
Yeah.
These are things that I'm reading this great book now by Malidoma Somé, The Healing Wisdom of Africa.
Yeah.
And this is summarized really well, how the African people, you know, rites of passage and ritual are deeply embedded in their culture.
Yeah.
And we're hungry for that here in the US. You know, we have a birthday party, but all we get when we graduate is a certificate and maybe again a party, and people are drinking, and it's not really witnessing the individual who just made a major milestone change. And so there's a lot of ritual involved in what I want to do for my healing retreat as well. Bring back the ritual and the celebration.
Wow, amazing, amazing. And I personally love retreats. I feel as though the deepest healing that I've had on an emotional level, like that has happened at a retreat. Like I had to be outside of my normal environment.
Yes.
In order for my mind and my body to experience something else.
That's right. That's right. So disconnecting from our daily grind and that overexposure to technology and Wi-Fi, and reconnecting to something that's grounding and calming.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to create this 3-day full retreat that is each day is like a different theme. And I think calm, cleanse, and connect is what I'm working with now to develop it. So I'm currently writing the program.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. All right. So when it's ready, you'll send it to me and I'll share it. I'll share it with the community, with the Birth World community.
I'm so excited for it. And it's really, it's birthing from my spirit's calling for me to do this work. And it's also, I'm hoping and I'm trusting that it's going to be well received because it's well needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. 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 All right. So you shared earlier that, you know, like when you were diagnosed with Lyme disease, you found that there were toxins and heavy metals and other things within your system. And we know for sure that those things impact fertility and pregnancy, one's ability to sustain a pregnancy. So tell us more about that, like how those things impact us and how we can heal them from our bodies.
Great. Yes. So most of our pregnancies and fertility issues are related to some type of hormonal situation, whether it's an imbalance or an overexpression of a certain hormone or a lack of. And our hormonal system, they're basically sponges, these systems. And one is located right in our upper body, in our thyroid area. And it's subject to absorption of lots of pollution through the food we eat. And it throws off the balance of the function of that gland. So for instance, we eat a lot of brominated flour out there, and bromine is an antagonist to the amino acids that we need in the thyroid, like tyrosine and iodine. It's a direct antagonist. So we eat brominated, enriched flours in our daily bread, and we're actually then blocking the ability of the thyroid to use iodine. So our hormonal system is subject to an onslaught of things. Another system that's greatly affected by our environment and the toxins in it is our gut microbiome, which do innumerable things. The amount of things that our gut microbiome do for us every day, the knowledge is growing and growing. And there's certainly connections to fertility and inflammation and just in general nutrient status. So when we eat foods that are not organic, they're often sprayed with things like glyphosate, and glyphosate is directly known to destroy the microbiome. So in other words, it kills off, it decreases our population of our defenders, and therefore it allows us to create the growth of bad bacteria that do not have the same capacity to have health promoting benefits.
Right.
And now it's like we have a street where our residents in the houses, instead of being the good guys, they're all the bad guys growing in there. So the gut immune system and the hormonal system are subject to lots of onslaught from from toxins in the environment. Also our emotional system, our mental emotional state, the dynamics between a couple, there's a lot of influence of that on pregnancy as well. And then dietary things also. The one major food that's probably the most likely to create some inflammation and perhaps imbalance and infertility is possibly gluten. And that's the protein that's found in several grains, including wheat. And there's lots of research behind this that shows that it's possibly creating some infertility and lots of neurological issues as well.
Wow.
People know about gluten causing celiac disease, which is a disorder in the gut where there's lots of pain and malabsorption, but there's much more people that are affected by gluten in the way of they're affected in their neurological system and in their musculoskeletal system, their joints. So they're dealing with things like headaches, anxiety, and maybe infertility and a little bit of arthritis. And it's the gluten in their diet that's doing that. So discovering food allergies, discovering and removing toxins, and discovering doing stool samples to look at the microbiology of the gut are the three main areas I focus.
Right.
And then of course the mental emotional basis too. So there's some tests that I would recommend. When a female is cycling, she cycles every single day, something changes. And so we're in a first phase of estrogen dominance, and then our second phase is a progesterone dominance. And if we don't have that progesterone rise, we cannot maintain the pregnancy. And so I think one of the most common things I found is a low progesterone or a low ability to maintain progesterone over the course of the pregnancy that is a risk for maybe getting pregnant but having a miscarriage. The other thing is looking at the hormone of the thyroid. The thyroid, I explain it as a triangle. The thyroid gland works with two other major important hormonal systems that create the rest of the triangle. So the thyroid is at the top, and our adrenal glands are at the sides, which are located on either side of our kidney. We have a little hat on each kidney, and that's the adrenal gland. And then the base of the triangle is the uterus and the ovarian hormones.
Wow.
So essentially, when we look at a woman's hormonal system, we cannot just look at her estrogen and progesterone level on one day. We have to look at it through the whole course of the month, and we have to consider thyroid hormone and ovarian hormones as well.
Yeah.
So follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, thyroxine, and triiodothyronine, both T4 and T3. So we take a magnifying glass and we zoom in on the body and we look at those systems to really make sure everything's working in its order.
Yeah.
If one link in the chain is broken, the rest of the chain will not work.
Wow.
So there are great laboratories out there that offer testing for this level of investigation. And one really nice one is the Dutch test. This is DUTCH, Dutch test, by Precision Analytics Lab, I believe. And basically it's a saliva test that's collected by the female every 3 days. And so it collects for 1 month, a whole entire cycle And we can see all of the way the progesterone and estrogen rose. When does it rise? If it's late, if it's, so there's lots of things we can discover just by collecting for 3 days, every 3 days for an entire month. We get a much more complete picture of what that person's health is like. So that's one way we evaluate hormones. And then, of course, through the blood, we look at both the T4 and the T3, and the free T3 also is a bioavailable form of the T3 hormone. Lots of doctors just look at thyroid stimulating hormone and they stop there. They figure that if the pituitary is, because the pituitary secretes thyroid stimulating hormone, if the pituitary is sensing that everything is fine, then everything must be fine. Well, sometimes the poor pituitary is doing its job a little bit wrong, or it's tired itself and it can't detect that. So it's not raising the flag of more thyroid stimulating hormone, please. It could be that the thyroid stimulating hormone is fine, but then the downstream hormone levels are actually not in optimal levels. So I always check both. Why not see if, so the mouse is telling us the pantry is full, but really, is the pantry full? Let's check the pantry. Why not?
Yeah.
And it's not that much more expensive. The test is, it's not a really, to look at a T4 or a T3 level, it's $20 maybe each test. So I don't know why it's not conventional that these things are tested, but so many times we catch hypothyroidism as an underlying cause of infertility. And making sure we do a good job, because, oh no, I went to my doctor, Dr. Mazza. I went to my doctor. They told me I didn't have a thyroid problem. Okay, let me see your labs, please, because I interpret them with a different lens.
Right.
My reference ranges are a lot smaller because I like to have optimal health. Oftentimes the reference ranges for illness in a standard medical model, those are for people that are actually sick. So how they created the optimal range in lab tests is by pooling all the blood from the people that gave blood and creating a normal reference range. But the people that are going to give blood are often the sick people. They're not the healthy people who are out having the babies and they're in their gardens and they're, taking their trips and they're dancing, whatever they're doing. So the medical model reference ranges for normal are based on a population of sick people's normal. So that's scary, number one. So we're trained with optimal levels, what a healthy person should have. So that means we're often more picky and, for instance, vitamin D, lots of us are talking about vitamin D levels right now as a preventer for COVID and an immune modulator. The reference range is between 30 nanograms per deciliter to 100, and that's normal. Well, that's a big reference range also. Our reference range is more like 80 to 100. 30 is still deficient. The great studies that show that vitamin D is protective against things like cancer, and it's even a mood modulator. It can even help us with depression. Wow. But at higher levels. So whenever a patient tells me, oh, I had that tested, it was normal, I don't ever take that for truth. And I like to see myself, and often we'll discover that there was some type of misdiagnosis, or just it was under investigated and we need to check further. So that's the thyroid hormonal basis, the Dutch test again. And then Cyrex Labs, CYREX in Arizona, they do a great job at looking at food allergies, especially for gluten. They are one of the most doing the most extensive tests for gluten reactivity. It's their array 4, I believe, and it looks at several different molecules of the gluten molecule, the gluten protein, for reactivity, whereas the standard test for celiac just looks at the gut, if you're having damage in the gut or not, and one marker for gluten insensitivity. So often people are, no, you're not gluten intolerant. When we do the other test that looks at all the ways that gluten can be reactive,
Yeah.
oftentimes something shows up positive, and not in all cases, of course, but it's just a more thorough, in-depth thing. So that's another lab test that I recommend. And then looking at toxicities, looking at toxic loads. Many of us have been exposed to lead and mercury, and now plastics. And so, and chemicals from all kinds of things, and especially women, women that, by the time they get up in the morning and take their shower to the time they walk out the door, there's something like 200 different chemicals that they've already applied to their body. Wow. From the soap that they're using in their bath, to the makeup and the cleansers they're using, to the sprays and the perfumes, and then actually what they've laundered their clothes in. So we're carrying about 200 chemicals on ourselves, and we haven't even had a glass of water yet to get our day started. Yes? So this is a major thing to look at. And the Environmental Working Group is a great resource. I want to empower you with this knowledge. The Environmental Working Group is ewg.org. And they basically have lists for, they have a dirty dozen list, which is the top 12 produce items that are most likely to have spray or to be sprayed with glyphosate. So the top 12 vegetables. And so in other words, any of these 12, anything on the dirty dozen list, buy that organic. Then they have a clean 15 list, which is these vegetables are often not sprayed or not sprayed as much. And so if you can't afford to buy everything organic, then buy these at least conventional, and buy the organic ones that appear, buy whatever's on the dirty dozen, buy that organic.
Yeah.
So they also have this Skin Deep report, which rates beauty products for a cleanliness, a green, they give it a green rating. And so you want to look at how toxic is this Maybelline makeup that I have, or how toxic is this Almay stuff, or whatever, and point out the brands that are clean, because there's lots of availability now and lots of alternatives. So what are the shampoos? What are the soaps that we should be using? What laundry detergents? All these things to think about. Yeah, so that's a great resource, the ewg.org.
Yeah, wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
What this is making me think of, so the clients that I work with, I mostly work on their emotional healing. That's how I support them.
Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you. And there's often so much guilt that they hold, thinking that, oh, like my body failed me, right? There's something wrong with me. Why I'm either not able to become pregnant, or I keep losing pregnancies. And it's so heartbreaking to know that it's all of these things in our environment or in our food that we're not even aware of, that's having a huge impact.
That's right.
Right. And how important it is to first just be educated on what those are, do some evaluation so that we can test if it's actually there, and then start the healing and the cleansing process.
That's right. Absolutely. And a naturopathic doctor can guide you through. They know based on your exposure risk, not all women are the same. And so there's lots of spectrum of testing for toxicities. And, if you've had mercury amalgams in your teeth, then you might want to get a heavy metal test. If you are somebody who, uses lots of bath and beauty products, and also those plug-in air fresheners, those are really terrible too. So if you've had exposure, your naturopathic doctor is going to ask you what exposures you've had, and then tailor the testing to that. Yeah.
I was chuckling to myself just now because I visit a family member who has the plug-in air fresheners, and whenever I visit, I always unplug them because I'm so sensitive to them. Like, this is burning my nose.
Yeah, they're very harsh, and they're very high in phthalates, and the phthalates are estrogen mimicking compounds. And so they are the same things that come from things like plastic and bisphenol A and phthalates. They are known to cause cancer. And so get rid of all those plug-in air fresheners. Don't buy them anymore. Buy a ultrasound, essential oil diffuser instead. they'll smell a lot better.
Yep, yep. I have one running right now with some grapefruit and some lavender.
Oh, nice. Wonderful.
Yes, yes. So you've mentioned or you've touched on the fact that our emotional health impacts our overall health. And I know that in a part of your care you use, is it Bach flowers
Bach
or the
flower.
Bach flowers? Tell us
Yes.
about that. Yeah.
Okay, so Edward Bach was a medical doctor, and around the 1930s in England, and around the
Mm-hmm.
1930s, he was also curious about taking healing to the next level. And so he was a bit of a medical intuitive. He was in touch with plants, and he had some inclination about, I wonder if this flower has some healing properties when you make a tea out of it, basically, which the essences of a flower are when water, a bowl of water is set out in the sun and the flower is allowed to soak in that water. So it's basically like a tea, an extract.
Yeah.
He started discovering that if folks took a certain flower extract, that it would create a shift in their mental, emotional being. And his underlying philosophy was that physical illness was a manifestation of our emotional and spiritual needs not being met. So we have a spiritual calling, a soul's calling, and when we can't reach that, we can't actually manifest it for some reason because people are saying no, or that's ridiculous, or that's just not the norm. Well, physical illness can manifest when we're not able to fulfill our soul's calling.
Wow.
So he started realizing by experimentation that if he gave this one flower to a person that he thought, so he was intuitive, that he thought would help with fear, sure enough, that person became less fearful. And over the course of his work, he would study the plant, meditate on it, make the flower essence, and then try it and give it to folks. And it would either confirm or show him a different indication for that essence. So he made it his life work to discover 36 different plants, all flowers mostly, except one is rock water. It's from the free flowing water of a stream.
Wow.
And so that's the only one that's not actually from a flower. And they are extremely healing. They're categorized and each kind of do a different type of work. He found 12 what he called soul type remedies, which basically address our constitution. We're all born into this life with some kind of setting and tendencies, and whether it's from our ancestral imprint or our genetics, we have a type that's just kind of our nature innately.
Yeah. Wow.
Then he discovered 7 helpers and the 12 healer, and then 7 helpers and the additional healers. So those remedies were meant to address the personality changes that affect us based on our experiences in this lifetime. So we're born here with a certain tendency to respond to things. And then based on our experiences, whether they're traumatic or they're joyful, we also tend to create personality traits based on those experiences. So the seven helpers are then used with the 12 soul type remedies to work together for addressing our unique individual state of a human being that has not only an imprint from our birth, but also we've had experiences that create some of our perceptions and our default reactions, our gut feelings based on our experiences. So this is an example of a Bach flower kit. These are half of the remedies, and usually I will also do kinesiology. Once I've talked to the patient, I'll do kinesiology where the person holds the remedy right in their hands, but
Mm-hmm.
they are basically in water and a little bit of either vinegar or brandy to
Mm-hmm.
preserve them.
Mm-hmm.
And a tincture is made by adding a few drops of each of these remedies into a mother of distilled water and either vinegar or brandy. And then it's taken usually in the morning and at night. So Edward Bach saw that when folks, when their conscious mind was a little bit in transition from asleep to wake,
Mm-hmm.
our guard was down a little bit, so we could, because sometimes we are in the way of our own healing
Yeah.
for various reasons. And so when our conscious mind is a little bit in transition of sleep to wake, our
Mm-hmm.
guard is down, and the energetics of the remedy can actually do better work. So we place
Wow.
the remedy under our tongue,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets absorbed through the large veins under our tongue, partly because of the alcohol as a preservative and a
Mm-hmm.
carrier.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol is easily absorbed into the bloodstream, so it's absorbed that way. And first thing in the morning, last thing at night. And then I always ask folks
Mm-hmm.
to say something empowering to themselves when they take the remedy. So if the remedy is for self-esteem, then I have them say something that makes them feel assurance that they have a good self-confidence. So,
Yeah.
and that personal statement is developed by them. I
Mm-hmm.
don't tell them what to say, but I encourage them to think about, what would you like to hear
Mm-hmm.
to lift up your spirits, and say
Yeah.
that when you take the remedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. I'm really curious about the rock one, the one that you said like it's
Oh,
from like
yeah.
the running water. What does that help with?
Yes. So rock water, admittedly, I'm a rock water. I am currently taking rock water myself. And so there's something in the whole natural world called
Mm-hmm.
the law of similars. And in general, this exists in the plant realm, and it exists in the Bach flower remedy
Mm-hmm.
realm as well. So
Yeah.
when you observe the plant in nature, some of its characteristics actually reflect the healing properties that it exists. And
Yeah.
so we see this with, a comfrey root. It's a good healer of the bones, and it's got this mucilaginous, and it knits things really together, and it's tight
Mm-hmm.
fabric. And so the plant itself, the physical nature of it, sometimes represents the healing that it offers for the body. And so
Mm-hmm.
rock water is just what it says. It's water that's flowing in a creek or a stream,
Mm-hmm.
passing by the rocks, and just going with the flow, letting things
Mm-hmm.
go lightly. And it's
Yeah.
for folks who have a tendency towards perfectionism and who tend to be driven and
Yeah.
want success. And
Yeah.
they tend to be hard on themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and often then maybe self-reproach if they didn't say the right thing, or,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if I would have only have done that. So
Mm-hmm.
rock water helps us to let go and
Mm-hmm.
go with the flow.
Yeah. I could do with some rock water.
Yeah. Yes.
I love when the intuition is always like, yeah, ask about this. Let's talk about that.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Bach flower remedies are sold in most health food stores.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a specific company that I purchased called Healing Herbs. Bernard Jensen was passed the knowledge from Dr. Edward Bach in England. These are made biodynamically, which is just in accordance to where the phases are of the moon and the stars. So
Wow.
astrology affects the plants. As we
Yeah.
know, the moon affects the tide of the ocean, just as simple
Right.
as that.
Right.
So certain moon phases and other planetary alignments affect the growth of leaves versus roots versus fruits. And so these are grown according to that, the days where flowers are preferential for the energy of that day.
Wow.
But you can get them typically in a brown bottle, and they're often you know, they're quite expensive. If you buy one bottle itself, it's about $12 up to $17 sometimes. I've seen it, but you often need blends of the remedies. So if you wind up blending yourself 5 to 7 remedies, you're going to spend almost $100, and all you need is a few drops of this into a regular bottle of water to really make the remedy. So I recommend going to someone who is a Bach flower practitioner who has a set, the mother set like this, and then they can, for $10, you know, of course the consultation, there's a fee for it, but the remedy itself costs you $10. So yeah.
Can I just say how excited I am about the retreat that you will be having, because I want to learn. I just want to sit with you and just learn, learn.
Okay, that's good. Well, I'm really happy to teach, and it's a big booster for me as well. So many folks really want the knowledge, and I'm happy to pass it on. And I like empowering people. Not that you're in this category, but I foresee myself focusing on underserved populations, women with children and families that are struggling. And so I want this to be sort of to serve all folks, you know, serving the people who have the financial means to come and plug into the full program, but maybe as a part of what they gift is a scholarship. So a future participant can come on scholarship and be, you know, and get the same experience at no or low cost, you know. So thank you for giving me the infusion of the vibes to keep it going. And certainly since you've come into my life, a lot of we've just met each other recently, and we have a lot of synergy between ourselves, and I think we're going to wind up creating something really good together. So
I can feel it. Yes. So for people who want to work with you, you know, obviously you share the different tests that people can ask for. For someone who wants to work with you specifically, how can they learn more about how to reach in touch with you?
Okay, great. So basically the best way to contact me is my email, and Natalie will share that with as links. And also I am at drmoniquemazza.com on the web, and I'll be posting new content and updating that website really soon. I do telehealth consultations in my home office here, which is this little Adobe built hut that you're looking at right now. I often prefer to see people in person if I could. So I do live about 45 minutes from Asheville, North Carolina, and I really would prefer to see folks in person. But as it is common these days, telehealth is just, you know, is a certainly good tool for us to connect as well. And I'm offering, you know, telehealth consultations as well online.
Yeah, awesome.
I do have a small Instagram account that I'm growing. It's mostly about my the side of me that's a farmer and a food grower. So that's DRM Mazza on Instagram, and I post things about my turkeys and chickens and my raised food beds and things. I also have a YouTube channel that again has mostly content about my garden, and that'll be a growing place for future educational videos. So keep an eye on that for more content.
Yeah, amazing. You also mentioned that you work in partnership with a person's, you know, physician or doctor, or it could even be a fertility specialist if they're working.
Absolutely. I always like to collaborate care, and therefore the patient has the full spectrum of what they need, because I can't provide the allopathic services in case of an emergency or other things. So I like the person to have an established practitioner in that allopathic world, also for access to testing, because unfortunately naturopathic doctors are not insured in many states, and so your health insurance won't cover it if I order your lab tests. So fortunately many lab tests, like I mentioned, are very low cost nowadays, so we don't have to worry so much about always getting it through insurance. But if a person has insurance, and has a medical doctor, then why not try to use it and preserve the budget that way? So I like to write letters introducing myself to the person's practitioner, whoever it may be, and tell them that I'm working with this patient. And then I call them a mutual patient, meaning they're seeing you and they're also seeing me. And for their best interest, and also for the interest of their insurance coverage, can you please consider running these tests? And of course, in the body of that letter, I'm also mentioning what the medical findings were that justify that test. And it's often things that the medical doctor wasn't aware of. Ooh, I didn't know you were dealing with that, because they didn't have the time to talk about that. So I'll justify in the letter what's going on, what the findings were, often raising some concern. And then they realize, ooh, if I don't test that, I could be held liable. So better run these tests. So I've gotten a little bit crafty in how to write them so that oftentimes they'll just say, yep. And then they're glad. A lot of the times too, the practitioners are glad that the patient has a naturopathic doctor that can do all that hard stuff. Spend the hour talking about your family and your diet. Go back there, because they're just kind of the quick and dirty model. So they're oftentimes encouraging that the patient stay under the care of the ND, and they're happy to do the lab tests. So it's a win-win situation. The other thing I should mention about, if you can't work with me, there's wonderful naturopathic doctors all over the country and all over the world, actually. Accrediting body that basically assures that you're going to get under the care of a licensed naturopathic doctor. And unfortunately, there are several states that do not regulate naturopathic medicine practice. North Carolina is one of them. So in other words, anyone off the street can say that they're a naturopathic doctor and they don't have any education. They do not have the same degree in training, but there's no regulation. So nobody is going to stop them from making that claim. People have been severely injured and even resulted some cases in death from being under the care of what they thought was an ND, but the actual person wasn't. So going to a licensed naturopathic doctor is critical. And how do you assure you're doing that is by going to the website for the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. That's www.naturopathic.org. And they have a find a doctor, find an ND link. And we should actually maybe include that link here for folks listening to this talk. You can put in your zip code, your city and state, and get linked up with naturopathic doctors who are certified, are licensed, and have met the criteria. And so that's the best way to find an ND in your local area and make a relationship with them that way.
Amazing.
I'd love to work with all of y'all, but I realize that might not be practical.
Awesome. So we've come to the end. Are there any final words that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, wow. Thank you for this opportunity, first of all, for helping me reach a larger audience. And I think it's an issue that naturopathic medicine is a human right. And we should all know that this exists and know the basics of taking care of our body. We should know that there are things in our foods that are not good for us, and we have choice what we buy, where we put our where we put our money behind as consumers can change the industry. So if we start buying more organic produce, all the produce will become organic. If we start buying clean and green laundry detergent and beauty products, the industry will shift. So the power of one is very powerful. We can make a big change, especially by where we put our dollars. And so getting with a naturopathic doctor to get the education and then making the change on an everyday level and starting small and working up from there. So if you just decide to do one thing for yourself this week that's healthier, that's infectious and it starts the change. So choose one thing and make it a healthy day and watch that grow.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Monique Mazza. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I have a sense that this one conversation that lasted, an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's going to open up so much for our listeners.
Great.
Yeah, I can feel that. So thank you so much for all that you shared, all the wisdom, and for all the ways that you'll continue to help people.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you all for listening, and share this with others who need the information as well. And I hope to meet as many of you as possible.
Yes.
Okay. Be well, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.